From heaven to hell. In Belle Meade, 4 women unite to destroy the man who played God with Nashville hearts. Welcome to Peter Stories, dear story lovers. On this magical Christmas season, I'm delighted to welcome you to our cozy corner of storytelling. Each story here is crafted with love, hoping to bring warmth and joy to your day. Thank you for being part of our growing family of readers. If these tales touch your heart, simply comment yes below and share your rating out of 10. Wishing you all a wonderful Christmas filled with magical moments. With love, Peter. Let's begin. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of Jackson Hayes's Belle Meade mansion, a 4-story architectural masterpiece that stood as a testament to new money in a neighborhood steeped in old Southern tradition. At 35, Jackson had already revolutionized the automotive industry with his AI-powered navigation system, Build Better Tech, making him Tennessee's youngest self-made billionaire. But on this particular autumn morning, as he stood before his floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the meticulously manicured gardens, something felt missing in his empire of success. His reflection stared back at him from the window, dark hair perfectly styled, Tom Ford suit impeccably tailored, Patek Philippe watch gleaming on his wrist. Everything about Jackson Hayes screamed perfection, or at least the carefully curated image of it. His phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, investors wanting meetings, charity galas requesting his presence, and society magazines begging for interviews. Nashville's elite had initially viewed him with skepticism. After all, he wasn't from old money, didn't attend their prestigious schools, and hadn't inherited his way into their social circles. But money, as it tends to do, eventually opened all the right doors. "Sir," his AI home system announced with its customized southern drawl, "your Bugatti Chiron has been detailed and is ready for the auto show. Would you like me to have Thomas bring it around?" "Yes," Jackson replied, adjusting his titanium cufflinks, "and make sure the prototype of the new nav system is installed. Today's not just about showing off, it's about proving Build Better Tech is still leading the industry." The house hummed with quiet efficiency as hidden mechanics whirred behind the walls. Each floor of his brownstone was a masterpiece of modern technology disguised behind classic Southern architecture. The ground floor, currently empty, featured a separate entrance and its own security system, perfect for the future Mrs. Hayes whenever he found her. The thought made him smirk. If only Nashville's socialites knew what he really wanted in a partner. As he descended the grand staircase, his footsteps echoing off the marble, Jackson reflected on his journey. 10 years ago, he'd been coding in a cramped apartment above a honky-tonk on Lower Broadway, surviving on hot chicken and dreams. Now his navigation system was standard in every luxury car manufacturer's lineup, from Ferrari to Rolls-Royce, but it wasn't enough. He craved something more, something real. The morning news played silently on various screens throughout the house as he made his way to the kitchen. Headlines scrolled past. Build Better Tech stock hits all-time high. Hayes donation funds new tech wing at Vanderbilt. Nashville's most eligible bachelor spotted at Symphony Gala. He grabbed his customary green smoothie from his smart fridge, which had prepared it exactly 7 minutes ago to ensure optimal temperature. "Thomas is waiting with the Bugatti, sir," the AI announced. "Current temperature is 72 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect for the convertible setting. Would you like me to have him lower the top?" "Not yet," Jackson replied, checking his reflection one last time in the kitchen's mirrored backsplash. "Let's make an entrance at the show." His private elevator hummed as it carried him to the underground garage, a space that would make any car enthusiast weep with joy. Lined with rare and exotic vehicles, each personally selected and customized, the garage was his sanctuary. The Bugatti waited at the center, its midnight blue paint job catching the LED lighting perfectly. Thomas, his driver and car manager, stood ready with a tablet displaying the day's schedule. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," Thomas said, his manner professional but warm. The new nav system installation went smoothly. We've run all diagnostics twice. Perfect, Jackson nodded, running his hand along the Bugatti's smooth curve. Today's about more than cars, Thomas. I can feel it. Sir? Thomas raised an eyebrow, used to his employer's occasional cryptic statements. Nothing, Jackson smiled, sliding into the driver's seat. The leather embraced him like an old friend. Just a feeling that something interesting is about to happen. As the garage doors opened silently, revealing the private drive that would lead him to Belle Meade Boulevard, Jackson checked his phone one last time. 3 separate calendar apps helped him manage his incredibly complicated life, each coded with different colors and encrypted to ensure privacy. Today's schedule looked simple enough. The auto show, a quick lunch meeting with investors, then dinner at... He paused, double-checking which evening plans belonged to this particular day. The Bugatti's engine purred to life, a sound that usually sent thrills through his body. But today, surrounded by all his wealth and achievements, Jackson Hayes felt strangely hollow. He'd conquered the tech world, dominated Nashville's social scene, and built an empire before hitting 40. Yet as he guided the Bugatti through the grand gates of his estate, he couldn't shake the feeling that his greatest challenge, and perhaps his greatest adventure, was still ahead. Little did he know, as he merged onto I-440 heading toward downtown Nashville, that in just a few hours he would meet someone who would completely upend his perfectly structured world. The autumn sun glinted off the Bugatti's hood as he accelerated, unaware that his life was about to become significantly more complicated and infinitely more interesting. The Music City Center loomed ahead, its curved roof resembling waves in the morning light. Luxury cars from around the world were being unloaded and positioned for the show, their polished surfaces creating a kaleidoscope of reflections. Jackson pulled into his reserved space, the Bugatti's engine note echoing off the center's glass walls. As he stepped out, several heads turned, some recognizing the man, others admiring the machine. "Mr. Hayes," called out Gerald Thompson, the show's organizer, hurrying over with an iPad clutched to his chest. "We've positioned your tech demo booth right next to the main stage, prime location just as requested." Jackson nodded, his mind already racing through the possibilities the day might bring. He'd attended dozens of auto shows, but something felt different about this one. Maybe it was the way the morning light caught the glass building, or perhaps it was just his imagination, but he could have sworn the air crackled with potential. "Perfect, Gerald. Let's make sure the Build Better Tech presentation runs smoothly. We're not just showing off cars today, we're showing the future." As he walked into the building, his shoes clicking against the polished floor, Jackson Hayes had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to change forever. In just a few hours, he would meet a woman who would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, success, and himself. But for now, he was still the king of his domain, the master of his fate, the billionaire tech genius who had Nashville wrapped around his finger. The auto show's lights dimmed for a moment before blazing to full brightness like a spotlight searching for its star. Jackson straightened his tie, checked his reflection in a nearby Ferrari's window, and stepped into what would become the first chapter of his most daring adventure yet. The morning was young, the crowds were starting to filter in, and somewhere in this vast space, destiny was waiting in the form of a Porsche sales representative named Madeline Foster. But that part of the story hadn't begun yet, and Jackson Hayes was still just a billionaire with everything to lose and no idea what he was about to gain. Chapter 2. The Car Show. Meet Cute. The Music City Center buzzed with the kind of electricity that only comes from millions of dollars worth of automotive excellence gathered under one roof. Chrome gleamed under strategic lighting, and the air carried the intoxicating mix of new leather, fresh rubber, and expensive cologne. Jackson Hayes moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his presence causing subtle ripples of recognition among Nashville's elite who had turned out for the year's most prestigious auto show. The Porsche section caught his eye, not just because of the stunning lineup of vehicles, but because of the woman standing beside the latest 911 GT3. Madeleine Foster didn't fit the usual mold of luxury car sales representatives. Where others relied on short skirts and rehearsed pitches, she wore a perfectly tailored charcoal pantsuit and carried herself with an air of understated confidence that spoke of genuine expertise. The rear-axle steering system on this model is particularly impressive, she was explaining to a couple who clearly knew more about their stock portfolio than sports cars. It provides counter-phase steering at low speeds for increased agility and same-phase steering at high speeds for improved stability. Her voice carried the warmth of Southern hospitality, but was stripped of the exaggerated drawl many adopted for show. Jackson found himself moving closer, ostensibly examining the car's carbon fiber wing, but actually listening to her detailed explanation of the PDK transmission's improvements over previous generations. When the couple moved on, looking slightly overwhelmed, he seized his moment. "That was quite the technical breakdown," he said, running his hand along the car's sculpted fender. "Most salespeople stick to horsepower numbers and 0 to 60 times." Madeleine turned, and Jackson felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine surprise. Her green eyes met his with a directness that suggested she'd sized him up in seconds. "Most customers want to know if it's faster than their neighbor's car," she replied with a slight smile. "But the real beauty is in the engineering details." She gestured to the front splitter. "Take this, for example. The aerodynamic efficiency isn't just about downforce. It's about creating a dialogue between the driver and the road." For the next hour, they dove deep into conversations that ranged from suspension geometry to the future of electric powertrains. Jackson found himself increasingly fascinated. Here was someone who didn't just sell cars. She understood them on a molecular level. "You know," he said during a brief lull, "I don't think you mentioned the price once during our entire conversation." Madeleine's smile turned slightly mischievous. "Mr. Hayes, if you have to ask about the price of a Porsche, you're probably in the wrong section of the show." The fact that she knew who he was didn't surprise him. His face had been plastered across enough local magazines and tech websites. What surprised him was how she'd waited an hour to acknowledge it. "Fair point," he laughed. "Though I'm more interested in how the car's computer systems interface with external navigation inputs." He paused deliberately. "Particularly systems like Build Better Tech." "Ah." Madeleine nodded, her expression shifting to one of professional interest. "Your company's nav system, the neural network adaptation to driving patterns, is impressive, though I've noticed some interesting quirks in how it handles complex interstate merges here in Nashville." Jackson's eyebrows shot up. "You've studied our system." "I make it my business to understand every aspect of the cars I sell," she replied, "including their technological ecosystems. Your nav system is brilliant, but it sometimes prioritizes efficiency over the experiential aspects of driving. Not every journey needs to be the fastest route." The conversation that followed was unlike any Jackson had experienced at an auto show, or anywhere else for that matter. Madeleine didn't just know cars, she understood the philosophy behind them. She challenged his assumptions about AI integration in luxury vehicles, offered insights he'd never considered, and did it all without once seeming like she was trying to impress him. As the morning wore on, other attendees drifted by, but Jackson barely noticed them. He found himself sharing stories about the early days of Build Better Tech, about coding in that tiny apartment above the honky-tonk, about the first time he saw his system installed in a production car. "That must have been quite a moment," Madeleine said, genuine interest in her voice. seeing your creation out in the real world, helping people navigate their journeys. It was, Jackson agreed, then added with a grin. Though I have to ask, if you're so familiar with our system's quirks, why haven't you reported them through our feedback channels? Oh, I have, she laughed. Under M. Foster, check your database. You'll find quite a few detailed analysis reports. Jackson made a mental note to look up those reports later. He had a feeling they would be fascinating reading. The conversation eventually turned to the GT3 they were standing beside. Madeline walked him through every detail, from the titanium connecting rods in the engine to the specific compound of the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires. Her expertise wasn't just mechanical, she understood the emotional connection between driver and machine. The thing is, she said, running her hand along the car's hood, a vehicle like this isn't just transportation. It's a statement about who you are and what you value. Some people buy it for status, but the real joy comes from understanding what makes it special. Jackson found himself nodding. It's like technology, he said. Anyone can use a navigation system, but understanding how it thinks, how it learns from each driver, that's where the magic happens. Their eyes met again, and for a moment the bustling auto show seemed to fade into the background. Here was someone who got it, who understood that true luxury wasn't about price tags or brand names, but about the pursuit of excellence in every detail. I'll take it, Jackson said suddenly. Madeline raised an eyebrow. Just like that? No test drive? I trust your expertise, he replied, though I might need some help understanding all its features once it's delivered. She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a business card. The design was minimal, just her name, title, and contact information printed on heavy stock paper. I'm available for the next month to answer any questions, she said, handing him the card. After that, you'll be in the capable hands of our regular client services team. Jackson took the card, noting the quality of the paper and the clean typography. Like everything else about Madeline, it spoke of attention to detail and understated excellence. I have a feeling I'll have quite a few questions, he said, slipping the card into his pocket. As they wrapped up the paperwork for the purchase, Jackson found himself already planning his first technical question. Something about the sport mode settings, perhaps, or the intricacies of the launch control system. Anything that would give him an excuse to continue their conversation. The rest of the auto show continued around them. The buzz of conversations, the flash of cameras, the subtle competition among Nashville's wealthy to be seen with the most impressive vehicles. But Jackson Hayes, the man who had everything, had just found something he never knew he was missing. Someone who could see past his billions to challenge his mind. As he left the show that afternoon, the business card feeling like it was burning a hole in his pocket, Jackson knew his life had just shifted onto a new track. He just didn't realize yet how complex that track would become. Thomas, he called his driver as he exited the Music City Center, clear my schedule for the next month. I have a feeling I'm going to be spending a lot of time learning about my new Porsche. The autumn sun was setting over Nashville, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Jackson looked back at the building where Madeline was probably already engaged with another customer, sharing her encyclopedic knowledge of automotive excellence. He smiled to himself, already composing his first technical question in his mind. The game was about to begin, and for once, Jackson Hayes wasn't sure if he was the player or being played. Either way, he couldn't wait to find out. Chapter 3. The Chase. The morning after the auto show, Jackson Hayes sat in his home office, staring at Madeline's business card as if it might reveal additional secrets under his intense scrutiny. The heavy cardstock felt substantial between his fingers as he turned it over for the 100th time. His AI assistant had already compiled a detailed profile of Madeline Foster, top Porsche sales representative in the Southeast region 3 years running, master's degree in mechanical engineering from Vanderbilt, and a reputation for encyclopedic knowledge of every vehicle she sold. Sir, his AI system interrupted his thoughts. Your new Porsche GT3 has been delivered to the garage. Perfect timing. Jackson had been waiting for this moment, having already scripted what he hoped would sound like a legitimate concern about the car. He picked up his phone, then put it down, too eager. He forced himself to wait another 30 minutes before making the call. Porsche Nashville, Madeline Foster speaking. Her voice was just as he remembered, confident and warm without being overly familiar. Ms. Foster, Jackson Hayes here. I've noticed something interesting about the car's behavior during cold starts. There was a slight pause on the line. Interesting how, Mr. Hayes? Perhaps it would be easier to show you, say over lunch at Kane Prime. He held his breath, wondering if he'd been too forward. Mr. Hayes, Madeline's tone was professional but carried a hint of amusement. Is there actually an issue with the cold start procedure? Absolutely, he replied, grateful she couldn't see his grin. The engine note seems particularly melodic when accompanied by the sound of clinking wine glasses and good conversation. To his relief, she laughed. I suppose, as your designated technical advisor for the next month, I should investigate this thoroughly. Shall we say 1 p.m.? And so began what would become known among Nashville's service industry as the most elaborate car-buying experience in Tennessee history. Over the next 4 weeks, Jackson invented increasingly creative problems with his Porsche, each requiring Madeline's expert consultation at various upscale locations around Nashville. Week 1 began with the cold start investigation at Kane Prime, where Jackson managed to stretch a discussion about engine temperatures into a 3-hour conversation, covering everything from classical music to quantum computing. Madeline matched him topic for topic, her expertise extending far beyond automobiles. You know, she said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, most clients don't typically need quite this much explanation about normal engine operating procedures. Most clients aren't as thorough as I am, Jackson replied. For instance, I'm particularly concerned about how the car handles the curves on the way. A Henrietta red. Perhaps we should test that tomorrow evening. By the end of the first week, Jackson had discovered issues that required investigation at 5 of Nashville's finest restaurants. Each time, Madeline arrived prepared with technical documentation and diagnostic equipment, only to find Jackson more interested in her opinions on everything from artificial intelligence to ancient philosophy. Week 2 brought more creative excuses. The navigation system seems to be malfunctioning, he claimed on Monday. It keeps suggesting routes past all these interesting wine bars. How peculiar! Madeline played along, her eyes twinkling. I suppose we should document this behavior thoroughly. They spent that evening at Barcelona Wine Bar, where Jackson learned that Madeline had spent a year in Spain studying automotive design. Her description of Mediterranean car culture somehow led to a debate about the future of autonomous vehicles that lasted until closing time. You know, she said as they waited for their cars, most navigation issues can be resolved with a simple software update. Ah, but then we wouldn't need to verify that the fix worked at LA Jackson tomorrow night, would we? The third week brought increasingly elaborate scenarios. Jackson once called her in a mock panic, claiming the car was making a strange noise that only seemed to occur while driving past the city's best live music venues. This led to an impromptu tour of Nashville's music scene with stops at the Bluebird Cafe, the Station Inn, and the Ryman Auditorium. Fascinating, Madeline noted dryly after their third venue. The noise seems to disappear completely when exposed to good music and better company. Each meeting revealed new layers to Madeline that intrigued Jackson further. She could discuss the aerodynamic principles of an F1 car's wing in one breath and debate the merits of different Nashville hot chicken spots in the next. Her knowledge wasn't just broad, it was deep, considered, and personal. During week 4, Jackson's excuses became increasingly transparent. "I think the leather seats need inspection," he claimed on a Wednesday. "Preferably over dinner at the Continental." "The leather seats," Madeline repeated flatly. "Yes, they seem to be experiencing optimal conditions when paired with a good steak and conversation." By this point, their meetings had developed a comfortable rhythm. Madeline would arrive with her diagnostic tablet, maintaining the professional pretense, while Jackson would have already selected a wine based on their previous conversations' tangents. They would start with some legitimate car talk before inevitably drifting into hours-long discussions about everything under the sun. As the end of the month approached, Jackson found himself running out of both excuses and time. He had discovered issues with every system in the car, from the cup holders investigated over coffee at Crema to the audio system, requiring extensive testing at the Nashville Symphony. On the final evening of Madeline's designated support period, Jackson pulled out all the stops. He claimed an urgent need to test the car's high-speed stability, which somehow required dinner at the Catbird seat, followed by drinks at Patterson House. "You know," Madeline said as they sat at the bar, "in 4 weeks, you've managed to find more creative issues with this car than all my other clients combined." "I'm very thorough," Jackson replied, then added more seriously, "and I've enjoyed every minute of investigating them with you." The air between them changed, the pretense finally dropping away. Madeline set down her glass and turned to face him fully. "Tomorrow, I go back to being just another Porsche sales representative," she said. "No more emergency diagnostics over dinner." Jackson took a deep breath. The moment he'd been both anticipating and dreading had arrived. He was used to being in control, to knowing exactly how every scenario would play out. But for the first time in years, he felt genuinely nervous. "Unless," he said carefully, "you'd be willing to continue our mechanical discussions in a more personal capacity." Madeline's expression was unreadable. "Are you asking me what I think you're asking me?" "Depends," Jackson smiled, trying to mask his nerves. "Would you say yes?" The silence that followed felt eternal. Around them, the bar continued its usual evening buzz, but for Jackson, the entire world had narrowed to this moment, this woman, this question. Finally, Madeline spoke. "Give me some time to think about it." It wasn't the answer he'd hoped for, but it wasn't a no. Jackson nodded, understanding that someone as thoughtful as Madeline would need to consider all angles. After all, she approached everything with the same detailed analysis she applied to her beloved cars. As they parted ways that evening, standing outside Patterson House under the Nashville stars, Jackson felt both hopeful and terrified. He'd built a billion-dollar company, revolutionized navigation technology, and earned a place among Nashville's elite. But none of that seemed to matter as he watched Madeline's car disappear into the night, carrying with it his hopes for something real in a life that had become increasingly complex. The next 2 weeks would be the longest of Jackson Hayes's life, filled with more uncertainty than he'd felt since those early days coding above the honky-tonk. But as he drove home in his perfectly functioning Porsche, he couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best journeys weren't about reaching the destination, but about enjoying every curve in the road. Little did he know, the road ahead would have more curves than he could possibly imagine. Chapter 4. A Web of Secrets. While Jackson Hayes anxiously awaited Madeline's answer, his 4-story brownstone in Belle Meade harbored secrets that would make even Nashville's most scandalous country songs seem tame by comparison. The building itself was a marvel of modern engineering disguised as a classic Southern mansion, designed specifically to accommodate its owner's complicated personal life. On the 2nd floor lived Delilah Montgomery, first violinist for the Nashville Symphony Orchestra. Her apartment was soundproof to recording studio standards, allowing her to practice at any hour without disturbing the other residents whose existence she knew nothing about. The space was decorated with vintage musical instruments and rare vinyl records, each personally selected by Jackson to reflect her passionate dedication to classical music. At this very moment, Delilah was practicing Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto, her bow dancing across the strings as she prepared for an upcoming performance. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the honey-gold highlights in her dark hair. A framed photo on her antique side table showed her and Jackson at the Symphony Ball 6 months ago, both dressed in formal wear, her smile radiating happiness. One floor up, Dr. Naomi Chen was just returning from her night shift at Vanderbilt University Medical Center's pediatric ward. The third floor had been customized to accommodate her irregular schedule, with automated blackout blinds and a specialized air filtration system that maintained perfect sleeping conditions regardless of the time of day. The kitchen was stocked with her favorite organic snacks, and a dedicated coffee station could brew the perfect cup with just a voice command. Naomi dropped her medical bag by the door, her surgical scrubs exchanged for comfortable loungewear. She checked her phone, smiling at the good morning text from Jackson, who she believed was in Seattle for a tech conference. In reality, he was just a few floors away, managing his intricate web of relationships through a complex system of scheduling and technology. The fourth floor belonged to Aaliyah Washington, a rising star in Nashville's tech startup scene. Her space was a perfect blend of modern luxury and functional workspace, featuring the latest smart home technology and a state-of-the-art home office. The walls displayed abstract art that concealed cutting-edge security cameras and sensors, all part of Jackson's elaborate system for maintaining his charade. Aaliyah was currently on a video call with investors, her confident voice carrying through the space as she pitched her latest innovation. She occasionally glanced at the Apple Watch that Jackson had given her for their 3-month anniversary, looking forward to their planned dinner date that evening, a dinner that would inevitably be cancelled due to a last-minute business emergency. The ground floor, soon to be Madeline's domain, remained pristine and empty, waiting for its future occupant. Jackson had already begun customizing it to match what he'd learned about her during their month of car-troubled dates. A private garage was being modified to house her car collection, and the library was being stocked with books on automotive engineering and classical philosophy. The building's sophisticated design made this elaborate deception possible. Each floor had its own secure entrance, accessible through a biometric system that Jackson had developed himself. The elevators were programmed with complex algorithms to prevent accidental encounters, and the building's AI system maintained separate profiles for each woman, ensuring that their paths never crossed. The central command center for this operation was hidden behind a bookcase in Jackson's private study on the penthouse level. Here, multiple screens displayed security feeds, calendar apps, and a proprietary software system he developed specifically for managing his complicated love life. Each woman had a color-coded schedule: purple for Delilah's symphony performances, blue for Naomi's hospital shifts, green for Aaliyah's tech events, and now a new gold category for Madeline's potential addition to his carefully orchestrated world. "Sir," his AI assistant chimed in, "Dr. Chen's sleep cycle has begun. Initiating quiet mode on floor 3. Ms. Montgomery's practice session will conclude in approximately 20 minutes, and Ms. Washington's investor call is scheduled to end at 11:30 a.m. Jackson nodded, studying the displays. His system was a masterpiece of organization and deception. Each woman believed she was in an exclusive relationship with a busy tech billionaire whose frequent travels and irregular schedule explained his occasional absences. In reality, those absences were carefully planned to allow him to spend equal time with each of them. The logistics were mind-boggling. Every date, every phone call, every text message had to be tracked and coordinated to maintain the illusion. Gift purchases were monitored to ensure no duplicates or crossover. Even his clothing choices were logged to prevent wearing the same outfit with different women too close together. Each relationship fulfilled a different aspect of Jackson's complex personality. With Delilah, he shared his love of classical music and artistic expression. Their evenings were spent at concert halls and underground jazz clubs, discussing the emotional power of musical composition. Naomi appealed to his intellectual side, their conversations ranging from cutting-edge medical research to philosophical debates about ethics in healthcare. Her dedication to saving lives inspired him, and her practical, analytical mind matched his own problem-solving nature. Aaliyah understood his tech world in a way the others couldn't. They could spend hours discussing coding challenges and startup strategies, their shared enthusiasm for innovation creating a unique bond. And now there was Madeline, who somehow managed to combine technical expertise with a depth of understanding that both excited and terrified him. His pursuit of her threatened to upset the delicate balance he'd created, yet he couldn't stop himself from wanting more. The complexity of maintaining these relationships required constant vigilance. Each woman's preferences, schedules, and habits had to be remembered and accommodated. The AI system helped track details like favorite foods, allergies, significant dates, and conversation topics to avoid repeating stories or mixing up personal details. Calendar alert, the AI announced. Ms. Montgomery's upcoming symphony performance conflicts with Ms. Washington's company launch party next Thursday. Jackson sighed, running his hands through his hair. These scheduling conflicts were becoming more frequent as his web of relationships grew more complex. He'd need to create a convincing business emergency to explain his absence from one of the events. The sound of Delilah's violin floated through the building's sophisticated audio system, her passionate interpretation of Tchaikovsky providing a soundtrack to Jackson's thoughts. On another screen, he watched Naomi sleeping peacefully after her long shift, while Aaliyah continued her animated discussion with investors. Each woman believed she had found her perfect match in Jackson Hayes. Each one thought she knew him completely. But the truth was, no one knew the real Jackson. The man who had built this elaborate facade, the master of deception who orchestrated every moment of their relationships with the same precision he'd used to build his tech empire. As he sat in his control center, surrounded by screens showing the separate lives he'd created, Jackson couldn't help but wonder if his pursuit of Madeline would be the thread that finally unraveled his carefully woven tapestry of lies. The thought should have terrified him, should have made him reconsider his course of action. Instead, he found himself hoping she would say yes, even as he knew it would make his life infinitely more complicated, because despite all his careful planning and technological solutions, despite having 3 remarkable women who each loved a different version of him, Jackson Hayes was still searching for something real. The violin music reached a crescendo. Aaliyah's voice carried confidence through the speakers, and somewhere in the city, Madeline was considering his proposal. Jackson leaned back in his chair, watching his world of secrets pulse with life on the screens before him, unaware that the clockwork precision of his deception was about to face its greatest test. Chapter 5. Southern Hospitality and Hidden Agendas. The autumn air in Nashville carried a crisp edge as Jackson Hayes faced his most challenging day yet. His elaborate scheduling system, typically a masterpiece of precision, was about to be tested to its limits. In a perfect storm of commitments, he had 4 events overlapping within hours of each other: Delilah's afternoon chamber music rehearsal, Naomi's hospital fundraiser, Aaliyah's tech startup pitch, and, assuming she said yes, his first official date with Madeline. Standing in his control center, Jackson studied the screens with increasing anxiety. His AI assistant had been working overtime to create plausible scenarios that would allow him to maintain his carefully constructed facades. "Sir," the AI's voice carried a note of concern, "Ms. Montgomery's rehearsal schedule has been moved up by 30 minutes. This creates a potential overlap with Dr. Chen's fundraiser setup." Jackson's fingers flew across the holographic keyboard, adjusting timestamps and location markers. "Initiate Protocol Delta," he commanded. "Route all calls from Delilah to the Seattle virtual office during the overlap window." The system hummed in acknowledgement, but another alert immediately flashed red. Aaliyah had just messaged about moving her pitch earlier, hoping Jackson could attend before his business trip. The same business trip he'd told Naomi would prevent him from staying at her fundraiser all evening. "Jesus," he muttered, pulling up his contingency protocols. The screens surrounding him displayed a dizzying array of calendar conflicts, location trackers, and communication logs. Each woman's schedule was color-coded, their movements tracked through a sophisticated mesh of sensors and cameras throughout Nashville. A message notification popped up. "Madeline." Jackson's heart rate spiked as he opened it. "Regarding your proposal, can we meet tonight, 8 p.m. at Patterson House?" The timing couldn't have been worse. He was supposed to be video calling with Delilah during her rehearsal break at 7:45, making an appearance at Naomi's fundraiser by 8:30 and checking in on Aaliyah's post-pitch celebration around 9. "Challenge accepted," he whispered, fingers already moving to reconfigure his schedule. First, he needed to handle Delilah's rehearsal. The Symphony Hall's security feeds showed her arriving early, violin case in hand. Jackson quickly activated the remote monitoring system he'd installed in the practice room, ostensibly as a gift for her to review her performances, but really another tool in his arsenal of deception. "Send flowers to Ms. Montgomery," he instructed the AI. "Her favorite peonies. Attach a note. The Tchaikovsky piece sounded divine this morning. Sorry I'll miss rehearsal. Emergency board meeting running late. 1 down, 3 to go." For Naomi's fundraiser, he'd need to make a physical appearance. The hospital board members knew him too well for a complete absence to go unnoticed. He pulled up the blueprints of the Hermitage Hotel where the event was being held, studying entry and exit points. "Schedule the Build Better Tech corporate helicopter for 8:45 p.m., he told the AI. "I'll need the dramatic entrance to explain my late arrival at the fundraiser. And make sure the pilot maintains radio silence about any other flights today." The system calculated his timing. If he left Patterson House by 8:40, the helicopter could create a diversion while he slipped into the fundraiser's main ballroom by 9. Just enough time to make a sizable donation, pose for a few photos with Naomi, and establish his presence before urgent business matters called him away. Aaliyah's situation required more finesse. Her startup pitch was crucial, and she'd been counting on his support. He pulled up the security feeds from the venture capital firm's office where she'd be presenting. "Initiate Protocol Gamma," he commanded. "Have my virtual presence system ready in their main conference room. Full holographic display. Real-time response capabilities." The AI began the setup sequence. The technology, developed by Build Better Tech for remote business meetings, would project a convincing hologram of Jackson into the conference room, allowing him to appear present and engaged while physically being elsewhere. The system was sophisticated enough to maintain eye contact and respond to social cues, all while Jackson could monitor and control it from his phone. But Madeline required his genuine presence. After a month of elaborate car-related excuses, she'd see through any technical solutions or virtual appearances. This meeting needed to be real. He studied the Patterson House's layout on his screens. The intimate speakeasy-style bar offered plenty of dark corners and private booths, but it also posed risks. The place was popular with Nashville's elite, including several people who knew the various versions of his life. "Run a social media scan," he ordered. "I need to know everyone who's planned to be at Patterson House tonight. Cross-reference with all known associates of Delilah, Naomi, and Aaliyah." The AI quickly compiled a heat map of potential complications. 3 of Delilah's symphony friends had dinner reservations. A doctor from Naomi's hospital frequently stopped by for post-shift drinks, and 2 investors from Aaliyah's tech circle were regulars on Thursday nights. "Perfect," Jackson muttered sarcastically. What could possibly go wrong? He began implementing countermeasures. A last-minute invitation to an exclusive wine tasting would divert the symphony friends. An emergency consultation would keep the doctor at the hospital. And a convenient server crash at the investor's firm would ensure they were occupied with technical emergencies rather than cocktails. As he orchestrated these elaborate diversions, Jackson caught his reflection in one of the dark screens. The man staring back at him looked tired, despite his perfectly pressed suit and carefully styled hair. For a moment, he wondered how he'd gotten here, how the simple pursuit of connection had evolved into this complex web of deception. But there was no time for philosophical reflection. His phone buzzed with messages from all 4 women. "Delilah, missing you at rehearsal. The acoustics aren't the same without you here." "Naomi, can't wait to see you at the fundraiser, even if it's just briefly." "Aaliyah, your hologram tech is amazing, but wish you could be here in person." "Madeline, confirmed for 8 p.m. We have a lot to discuss." Each message carried its own weight of expectation, its own version of truth. Jackson took a deep breath, straightening his tie as he prepared to step into the most complicated evening of his already complex life. "Sir," the AI interrupted his thoughts, "there's one more potential complication. The weather forecast shows a 60% chance of thunderstorms tonight. This could affect the helicopter's flight plan and create traffic delays between venues." Jackson laughed despite himself. Of course there would be thunderstorms, because juggling 4 women, multiple events, and elaborate technical deceptions wasn't challenging enough. Mother Nature had to add her own twist to the evening. "Well," he said, checking his watch as he prepared to leave his control center, "at least life isn't boring." As he stepped into the private elevator, Jackson Hayes, the man who had built an empire on predictive algorithms and controlled systems, was about to learn that some things couldn't be managed with technology and careful planning. The storm clouds gathering over Nashville were more than just weather. They were an omen of the chaos to come. Little did he know, this evening's intricate dance would soon seem simple compared to the challenges that lay ahead. Because somewhere in the city, 3 women were beginning to notice patterns in his behavior, asking questions about his convenient absences, and slowly discovering connections that his elaborate systems hadn't accounted for. The perfect storm was brewing, and not even the most sophisticated AI could predict where the lightning would strike first. Chapter 6. The cracks begin to show. Even the most sophisticated systems have their breaking points. For Jackson Hayes, that point began with a single strand of blonde hair. Delilah Montgomery had always been detail-oriented. You don't become first violinist of the Nashville Symphony without an eye for precision. So when she found the long platinum blonde hair on Jackson's Tom Ford jacket, the one he'd supposedly worn to an all-male tech conference in Seattle, something clicked in her mind. The hair was too long to be coincidental, too perfectly placed on his shoulder to be random. It was Aaliyah's hair, though Delilah didn't know that yet. What she did know was that it didn't belong to any of the women Jackson had mentioned in his carefully curated stories about his business dealings. That same morning, across town at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Dr. Naomi Chen was reviewing security footage from the hospital's parking garage. A recent string of car break-ins had prompted the administration to install new cameras, and as head of pediatric surgery, she had access to the feeds. She wasn't looking for anything specific until she saw it. There was Jackson, helping a stunning blonde woman into his Porsche GT3 on a night he was supposedly in Knoxville for a Build Better Tech board meeting. Naomi watched the timestamp, 8:45 p.m. last Tuesday. She checked her text messages from that evening. Missing you. These board meetings run so late. Wish I was there with you instead. The woman in the video was Madeline, though Naomi had no way of knowing her name. What she did know was that the gentle way Jackson helped her into the car, his hand lingering on her lower back, spoke of intimacy rather than business. Meanwhile, in her top-floor office at one of Nashville's hottest tech incubators, Aaliyah Washington was about to stumble upon her own piece of the puzzle. She'd been working late, debugging a new app, when her assistant mentioned seeing Jackson at the Bluebird Cafe the previous night. That's impossible, Aaliyah had laughed. He's in California for meetings. Miss Washington, her assistant said carefully, I'm certain it was him. He was with a brunette in a red dress. They stayed for both sets. The brunette was Delilah there, to perform a special chamber music arrangement of classic country songs. But to Aaliyah, it was just another piece of evidence that didn't fit the narrative she'd believed. These small discoveries might have remained isolated incidents, floating in the Nashville air like notes from an unfinished song. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The first real crack in Jackson's carefully constructed world appeared on a humid Tennessee evening at the Hermitage Hotel's Oak Bar. Delilah had stopped in for a drink after rehearsal, seeking the comfort of their famous Manhattan in the wake of her unsettling discovery. She'd chosen a quiet corner booth, violin case tucked safely beside her, when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. And then Jackson said the funniest thing about the car's navigation system. A woman's voice carried across the bar. Delilah froze, her drink halfway to her lips. She knew Jackson's voice, his laugh, his stories intimately. The woman speaking was sharing details that felt too personal, too specific to be casual business talk. At that exact moment, across town at Pinewood Social, Naomi was having a similar experience. She'd met a colleague for coffee, trying to shake off her unease about the parking garage video, when she spotted a familiar figure through the window. Jackson, sitting at an outdoor table with a woman she didn't recognize. He was supposed to be in a video conference with Silicon Valley investors. The woman was Aaliyah, though Naomi didn't know that. What she did know was that the easy intimacy between them, the way the woman casually touched Jackson's arm as she laughed, told a story that contradicted everything she believed about their relationship. The third crack appeared in the most modern of ways, through social media. Aaliyah, troubled by her assistant's revelation, had begun digging through Instagram hashtags related to Nashville's social scene. She found a photo from 3 months ago. Jackson at the Symphony Ball, his arm around a striking violinist as they posed with the conductor. The image had been buried in a series of event photos, tagged only with generic hashtags about Nashville society. But there was no mistaking Jackson's smile, or the way he looked at the woman in the photo. The same way he looked at Aaliyah when they discussed tech innovations over late-night takeout in her office. These discoveries began to snowball, gaining momentum like a Tennessee thunderstorm building over the Cumberland River. Each woman, acting on her suspicions, began paying closer attention, asking more questions, noticing more inconsistencies. Delilah started keeping a journal of Jackson's supposed business trips, cross-referencing them with symphony events she knew he'd attended. The dates didn't add up. There were too many overlaps, too many impossible coincidences. Naomi, with access to hospital security systems, began noticing patterns in Jackson's visits. He always seemed to avoid certain times, certain days, as if working around a schedule she couldn't see. The precision of his absences was too perfect to be random. Aaliyah, applying her coding skills to the problem, created an algorithm to track Jackson's digital footprint across Nashville's social media landscape. The pattern that emerged showed a man who seemed to exist in multiple places, multiple social circles, each carefully separated from the others. The tension built slowly, like the tuning of a symphony orchestra before a performance. Each woman collected her evidence privately, unaware that others were doing the same. But the storm was building, the pressure increasing, and something had to give. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening at the Bluebird Cafe. By pure chance, or perhaps fate's cruel sense of humor, all three women had chosen the same night to drown their suspicions in music and wine. Delilah arrived first, choosing a table near the back where she could lose herself in the performances. Naomi came next, settling at the bar with a clear view of the stage. Aaliyah walked in just as the first set was beginning, taking one of the few remaining seats near the entrance. None of them knew the others, but they all knew Jackson. And when his name came up in 3 separate conversations around the small venue, the invisible threads connecting their lives began to tangle. It started with a simple comment from a waitress to Delilah. "Your boyfriend was here last night with another woman," followed by a bartender mentioning to Naomi, "Mr. Hayes sure loves our Thursday night shows. He was here twice last week." And finally, a regular patron speaking too loudly near Aaliyah. "That tech billionaire, Hayes. Yeah, he brings different women here all the time, always sits at that corner table." The air in the cafe grew thick with unspoken suspicions. 3 women, each holding a piece of the puzzle, sat unknowingly connected by the same man's lies. But the real catalyst, the moment that would ultimately shatter Jackson's carefully constructed world, happened when his newest complication walked through the door. Madeline Foster, still considering his proposal, had chosen the Bluebird for some quiet contemplation. As she stepped into the dimly lit space, 3 pairs of eyes were drawn to her, not because they knew who she was, but because of what she carried. A small gift bag from Build Better Tech, identical to ones each of them had received at different points in their relationships with Jackson. The storm that had been building was about to break, and not even Jackson's sophisticated AI systems could prevent the lightning from striking. In the heart of Music City, 4 women were about to discover they were all starring in different versions of the same love song. And somewhere across town, in his high-tech control center, Jackson Hayes was about to learn that some things can't be managed with algorithms and careful planning. The truth, like a Nashville summer storm, was about to sweep through his life with unstoppable force. Chapter 7. The Great Nashville Detective Club. The morning after the Bluebird Cafe revelation dawned humid and electric, much like the atmosphere among the 4 women who had unknowingly shared the same space the night before. What happened next would transform their individual suspicions into Nashville's most sophisticated private investigation. Aaliyah Washington sat in her top-floor office at the tech incubator, multiple monitors displaying the results of her overnight data mining. As a tech entrepreneur, she approached the problem the way she approached everything, with algorithms and data analysis. Her custom-written program had been scraping social media, event photographs, and public records all night, creating a complex web of Jackson's movements throughout Nashville. Cross-reference facial recognition with location data, she commanded her system. The screens flickered, displaying a timeline that made her heart sink. Jackson appeared at multiple events on the same nights, always perfectly spaced, always with different women. The pattern was too precise to be coincidental. Meanwhile, across town at Vanderbilt Medical Center, Dr. Naomi Chen was conducting her own investigation. She'd pulled security footage from every hospital camera for the past 6 months, tracking Jackson's visits. With surgical precision, she created a spreadsheet of his appearances, noting the times, durations, and any companions. "Dr. Chen, her assistant interrupted. "There's someone here to see you. A violinist from the symphony. She says it's urgent." Naomi looked up to find Delilah Montgomery standing in her office doorway, violin case in hand, and a determined look in her eyes. Before either woman could speak, Naomi's computer chimed with an incoming email from an unknown sender. .washington@nashtech.com. Subject: Jackson Hayes. "We need to talk." The pieces were beginning to fall into place. Within hours, Aaliyah's office had been transformed into command central for what they jokingly dubbed the Great Nashville Detective Club. 3 women, each brilliant in their own field, pooled their resources and expertise to unravel the mystery of Jackson Hayes. "My algorithm tracked his movements through public photographs," Aaliyah explained, gesturing to the digital map of Nashville displayed on her wall-sized screen. Red dots indicated Jackson's appearances over the past year. "Notice the pattern? He never appears in the same social circles. It's like he's living in completely separate worlds." Delilah nodded, pulling out her leather-bound performance diary. "I've been tracking his supposed business trips against my symphony schedule. Look at this. Every time I had a morning rehearsal, he was mysteriously in Seattle. Every evening performance, he had meetings in California." "The hospital security footage shows something similar," Naomi added, pulling up her meticulously organized spreadsheet. "He only visits during my shifts, always between specific hours. I checked with other departments. No one sees him at any other time." As they compared notes, a clear picture emerged. Jackson Hayes, tech billionaire and supposed devoted partner, had constructed an elaborate system of lies that would put a spy novel to shame. "But why didn't we notice sooner?" Delilah wondered aloud, absently plucking her violin strings. "We're not exactly naive women." "Because he used our own strengths against us," Aaliyah realized. "With me, he talked tech and startups. With you, Delilah, it was music and culture. And with Naomi, medicine and research." Naomi finished. "He made each of us feel like we had a unique connection, something special that no one else could understand." Their conversation was interrupted by a notification on Aaliyah's main screen. Her facial recognition algorithm had found another match. A beautiful woman at the recent auto show, standing beside Jackson at the Porsche display. "Madeline Foster," Aaliyah read from the caption, "top sales representative for Porsche Nashville." The 3 women stared at the image, recognizing her from the Bluebird Cafe. The 4th player in Jackson's elaborate game had been identified. What followed was a masterclass in collaborative investigation. Aaliyah's tech expertise provided the digital backbone, creating secure communication channels and organizing their findings. Naomi's analytical mind developed a systematic approach to gathering evidence, while Delilah's social connections in Nashville's elite circles brought crucial intelligence from the ground. They established a secure base in Aaliyah's office dubbed the Situation Room, complete with encrypted communications and real-time monitoring of Jackson's digital footprint. Each woman contributed her unique skills to the investigation. Aaliyah developed an AI-powered analysis tool they called the Hayes Calculator, which predicted Jackson's movements based on historical patterns and current data. The system could forecast his likely location with shocking accuracy. Naomi created detailed psychological profiles, analyzing every interaction, every gift, every conversation for patterns and inconsistencies. Her medical training provided insights into behavioral patterns and potential vulnerabilities in his deception. Delilah utilized her extensive network in Nashville's social scene, gathering intelligence from party planners, venue managers, and society photographers. Her violin case became a mobile command center filled with documentation and surveillance equipment disguised as musical accessories. They even assigned code names for secure communication. Aaliyah became Oracle, managing their digital operations. Naomi was Scalpel, coordinating precision timing of their investigation. Delilah took Stradivarius, handling social intelligence, and Madeleine, though not yet part of their group, was designated Target 4. Their investigation revealed the stunning scope of Jackson's deception. He hadn't just been dating multiple women, he had created entirely separate lives, each meticulously crafted to appeal to different aspects of his personality. "Look at this," Aaliyah pointed to a series of calendar entries. "He's got a completely different schedule for each of us. Different restaurants, different social circles, different parts of town. It's like he's running multiple simulations of his life in parallel." "The level of organization is incredible," Naomi admitted, studying the patterns. "Every alibi has backup documentation. Every absence has a plausible explanation. He's even coordinated his stories with actual tech industry events." Delilah was examining photographs from various social events. "He never appears in public with more than one of us in the same month. And look at his clothing. He never wears the same outfit with different women, even weeks apart." As they dug deeper, they discovered the true extent of Jackson's technological infrastructure. His AI system, originally designed for navigation, had been modified to manage his complex web of relationships. The brownstone itself was a marvel of automated deception, with separate entrances, scheduled elevators, and sophisticated security systems keeping his various lives separate. "We need to tell Madeleine," Naomi said finally, looking at the latest surveillance photos showing Jackson and the Porsche representative at dinner. "She's about to become part of this mess." The others agreed, but the question was how. They needed to approach this carefully, strategically. After all, they were dealing with a man who had managed to maintain multiple relationships in a city where everyone knew everyone, using technology that would make the CIA envious. "We need proof," Aaliyah insisted, "concrete, undeniable evidence that even his AI system can't explain away." They spent the next week gathering their evidence, each woman playing to her strengths. Aaliyah hacked into his calendar system, documenting the overlapping schedules. Naomi compiled surveillance footage from various locations around Nashville. Delilah collected testimonies from vendors, musicians, and social contacts. But they needed one final piece to complete their case: evidence that Jackson was actively pursuing Madeleine while maintaining his other relationships. The opportunity came when Aaliyah's system detected a dinner reservation for two at the Continental. Through their combined resources, they confirmed that Jackson planned to meet Madeleine there, supposedly to hear her answer to his proposal. "That's our moment," Delilah said, her violin temporarily forgotten in its case. "We can't let her make a decision without knowing the truth." The women looked at each other, years of combined intelligence and determination focused on a single goal. They had the evidence, they had the motivation, and now they had their opportunity. "Ladies," Aaliyah said, pulling up a detailed floor plan of the Continental on her main screen, "let's plan an intervention." As thunder rolled across the Nashville sky, three brilliant women prepared to expose the man who had underestimated them all. Their investigation was about to move from gathering intelligence to taking action, and Jackson Hayes' carefully constructed world was about to collapse like a house of cards in a Tennessee tornado. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. The evening of the confrontation arrived with the kind of theatrical weather Nashville reserves for its most dramatic moments. Lightning flickered across the skyline, illuminating the Belle Meade mansion, where Jackson Hayes' carefully constructed world was about to implode. The four-story brownstone loomed against the stormy sky, its sophisticated security systems humming with their usual efficiency, unaware that they were about to be rendered useless by the very women they were designed to keep apart. In her ground-floor apartment, Madeleine Foster sat in contemplative silence. The past 2 weeks since Jackson's proposal had been a whirlwind of emotions and, more recently, disturbing revelations. The other women had approached her carefully, strategically, presenting their evidence with the same precision they'd used to gather it. "Operation Checkmate is in position," Aaliyah's voice came through the encrypted communication device she'd provided each of them. She was in her customized tech command center, surrounded by monitors showing security feeds from every angle of the brownstone. "Medical kit standing by," Naomi confirmed from her position in the kitchen. They didn't plan on needing it, but the doctor's instincts demanded preparation for every contingency. "Musicians are in place," Delilah added with grim humor. She'd arranged for several members of the symphony to be coincidentally practicing in the park across the street, providing both cover and witnesses if needed. The stage was set for what Aaliyah had dubbed the greatest show in Nashville since the Grand Ole Opry. Their plan was precise, timed to the millisecond, coordinated through a mesh network of devices that rivaled military operations. 7:45 p.m., Jackson's Bugatti appeared on Aaliyah's monitors, turning onto Belle Meade Boulevard. "Target is approaching," she announced, her fingers flying across keyboards, "initiating Protocol Alpha." Throughout the brownstone, systems began to shift. Security cameras froze on loop, electronic locks disengaged, and automated lighting created the illusion of normal evening activities on all 4 floors. 7:52 p.m., the Bugatti pulled into the private garage. Jackson Hayes stepped out, adjusting his Tom Ford tie with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled every aspect of his world. "Ready for phase 2? Naomi's voice was steady in their earpieces. "Delilah, violin concerto beginning right on schedule," Delilah confirmed. The sound of Tchaikovsky drifted across the street, a dramatic soundtrack for what was about to unfold. Jackson entered through the main entrance, his footsteps echoing in the marble foyer. Everything seemed normal, exactly as his sophisticated systems had been programmed to maintain. He checked his phone, confirming that Delilah was at rehearsal, Naomi was at the hospital, and Aaliyah was at a tech conference. 8 p.m. He approached Madeline's ground-floor apartment, a bouquet of rare orchids in hand. The flowers had been specially flown in from Singapore, a detail that would have been impressive if he hadn't ordered identical bouquets for each woman at different times. "Showtime," Aaliyah whispered into their comm system. With practiced precision, she executed the commands that would seal all exits. The brownstone security system, designed to keep the women separate, now served to trap its creator. Jackson knocked on Madeline's door, his practiced smile in place. She opened it slowly, and his smile faltered slightly at her expression. "We need to talk," Madeline said, stepping back to reveal Delilah sitting at the baby grand piano in the corner. Jackson's face went pale. There must be some mistake," he stammered, his mind racing to comprehend how his perfect system had failed. "No mistake," Naomi's voice came from the kitchen as she emerged, still wearing her surgical scrubs. "We've compared notes quite thoroughly." "Quite thoroughly indeed," Aaliyah added, appearing from the study with her laptop displaying damning evidence across its screen. The great Jackson Hayes, master of technology and deception, stood frozen in his own trap. The orchids slipped from his grasp, hitting the marble floor with a soft thud that echoed in the terrible silence. "How?" he managed, his eyes darting between the women he'd worked so hard to keep separate. "Did you really think you could outsmart a tech entrepreneur, a surgeon, a concert violinist, and a woman who can sell million-dollar cars?" Madeline asked, her voice carrying a mix of hurt and satisfaction. Aaliyah opened her laptop, projecting onto the apartment's walls a devastating presentation of evidence. Security footage, calendar entries, phone records, and social media posts created a damning tapestry of deception. "Your AI system was impressive," Aaliyah continued, "but it had one fatal flaw. It didn't account for human intuition. A single blonde hair, a chance sighting, a duplicate gift, small things that technology can't explain away. The statistics were against you, Naomi added clinically. The probability of maintaining 4 separate lives in a city like Nashville, where everyone knows everyone, the variables were too numerous. And the music world talks, Delilah contributed, her fingers playing a mocking few notes on the piano. Every restaurant, every venue, every event, people remember the charming billionaire and his dates. Jackson's carefully maintained facade cracked. His shoulders slumped as the weight of his deception came crashing down. The sophisticated security system, the separate entrances, the scheduled elevators, all useless now. "Ladies, I can explain," he began, reaching for the smooth charm that had served him so well. "Save it for the police," Madeline cut him off. "They're particularly interested in how you used Build Better tech resources to maintain your deception." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in stark bursts that matched the revelations crashing around Jackson. Thunder rolled across Nashville as his world collapsed. The women had positioned themselves strategically around the room, blocking all exits. Aaliyah's tech had disabled his phone and access to the building's systems. Naomi stood ready with her medical bag, prepared for any attempt at dramatic gestures. Delilah's musician friends outside provided a wall of witnesses. "You played us all," Madeline continued, her voice steady. "Used our passions, our interests, our dreams to create perfect, customized versions of romance. The tech genius for Aaliyah, the cultured patron for Delilah, the philanthropist for Naomi, and the car enthusiast for you," Jackson finished quietly. "But it wasn't all lies. Each relationship was real in its own way." "That's the problem," Naomi observed. "You created 4 real relationships, 4 real connections, 4 real betrayals." Aaliyah's laptop chimed, displaying police cars approaching on the security feeds. "They're here," she announced, "right on schedule." As red and blue lights began to flash outside, reflecting off the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, Jackson Hayes finally understood the magnitude of his miscalculation. He had underestimated these women, seeing them as separate characters in his personal drama, rather than the powerful individuals they were. "For a man who built his fortune on predicting patterns," Delilah noted, playing the first few bars of a funeral march on the piano, "you missed the most obvious one. Brilliant women eventually compare notes." The police entered with professional efficiency, their presence barely needed as Jackson offered no resistance. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by a dawning realization of what he'd lost. As he was led away, the 4 women stood in the marble foyer of the brownstone that had housed so many lies. The storm outside began to ease, as if nature itself was acknowledging the clearing of the air. "Well, ladies," Aaliyah said, closing her laptop with a satisfying click, "I'd say that concludes the Great Nashville Detective Club's first case. And hopefully its last," Naomi added, finally allowing herself to smile. They looked around at the sophisticated systems and separate entrances, all the technical marvels that had maintained Jackson's deception for so long. "What happens now?" Delilah asked, her violin case clutched close like a shield. Madeline walked to the windows, watching the police cars pull away. "Now," she said thoughtfully, "we rebuild our lives, but this time on our own terms." The 4 women, brought together by betrayal, but united by their strength and intelligence, stood in silent solidarity as the last rumbles of thunder faded over Nashville. They had dismantled a masterpiece of deception, using nothing but their wits, their skills, and their determination. In the end, Jackson Hayes's greatest creation, his web of lies, had been unraveled not by a system failure or a technical glitch, but by the very things he had tried to manipulate: human intuition, professional expertise, and the undeniable power of women working together. Chapter 9. Southern Justice. The Davidson County Courthouse stood imposing against the Nashville skyline, its limestone facade gleaming in the morning sun. Inside courtroom 3A, the air crackled with tension as the most scandalous case in recent Tennessee history was about to begin. The local media had dubbed it the Brownstone Betrayal, and every seat in the gallery was filled with spectators eager to witness the downfall of Jackson Hayes. Judge Martha Sullivan, known throughout Tennessee as the Steel Magnolia for her blend of Southern grace and ironclad justice, surveyed the courtroom from her elevated bench. At 65, she'd seen every kind of case imaginable, but this one had captured even her seasoned attention. "All rise," the bailiff called out as she entered. "Criminal Court of Davidson County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Martha Sullivan presiding." The click of expensive heels on hardwood announced the arrival of the four women who had brought down Nashville's most eligible bachelor. They entered as a united front, Aaliyah Washington in a perfectly tailored power suit, tablet in hand, Dr. Naomi Chen in sophisticated professional wear that spoke of quiet authority, Delilah Montgomery in an elegant ensemble that would suit both courtroom and concert hall, and Madeline Foster in a stunning designer outfit that reminded everyone she sold luxury cars for a living. Jackson Hayes sat at the defense table, his Tom Ford suit unable to hide the toll the past weeks had taken. His legal team, the finest money could buy, surrounded him with briefcases full of motions and arguments, but even they seemed to sense the futility of their position. Docket number 2024-CR 7425. The State of Tennessee versus Jackson Hayes, the clerk announced. Charges include fraud, misuse of corporate resources, and multiple counts of emotional manipulation with intent to deceive. The district attorney, Sarah Beth McKenzie, rose from her seat. Her reputation for being as sharp as a Tennessee winter morning had earned her the nickname the Nashville Nightmare among defense attorneys. "Your Honor," she began, her soft drawl belying her razor-sharp legal mind, "the state intends to prove that Mr. Hayes orchestrated an elaborate scheme of deception, using his company's resources and sophisticated technology to maintain multiple, simultaneous relationships under false pretenses." The evidence presentation began with Aaliyah's technical testimony. She stood at the witness stand, commanding the courtroom's attention as she explained the complexity of Jackson's deception. "The defendant modified Build Better Tech's AI systems," she explained, as her demonstrations appeared on the courtroom's screens. "He created what we call a relationship management system, a complex network of scheduling algorithms, security protocols, and communication filters designed to maintain separate lives with each of us." The courtroom watched in stunned silence as she displayed calendar overlaps, security footage, and communication logs. Jackson's legal team objected repeatedly, but Judge Sullivan overruled them each time with increasing irritation. Naomi's testimony followed, clinical and precise. She presented a psychological analysis of the manipulation, complete with a timeline of lies and manufactured emergencies. "As a surgeon, I deal in precision and truth," she stated firmly. "Mr. Hayes created elaborate medical emergencies to explain his absences, exploiting my professional understanding and compassion." Delilah's testimony brought a cultural dimension to the case. She played a violin piece, approved by Judge Sullivan as demonstrative evidence that showed how Jackson had used Nashville's vibrant arts scene to compartmentalize his relationships. "He attended the same symphony performance 3 times in 1 week," she revealed, "each time with a different woman, seated in different sections, arriving and leaving at precisely calculated intervals." But it was Madeline's testimony that delivered the killing blow. She stood at the witness stand, poised and professional, yet her words carried the weight of personal betrayal. "Mr. Hayes didn't just lie to us," she explained, her voice steady. He created separate versions of himself, each carefully crafted to appeal to our individual interests and aspirations. To me, he was the car enthusiast who needed endless technical consultations. To Dr. Chen, he was the medical philanthropy advocate. To Ms. Montgomery, the passionate patron of the arts. And to Ms. Washington, the tech visionary. The defense tried to paint Jackson's actions as merely poor judgment in personal relationships, but D.A. Mackenzie systematically demolished their arguments. This wasn't just a man dating multiple women, she argued, her southern accent adding bite to her words. This was a calculated scheme that involved corporate resources, sophisticated technology, and deliberate manipulation of multiple lives. During a particularly tense moment, Jackson's lead attorney attempted to justify the use of Build Better Tech resources. Your Honor, my client's position as CEO gave him discretion over company resources. Counselor, Judge Sullivan interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. Are you suggesting that corporate assets can be used as tools for personal deception? The attorney wilted under her stern gaze. The trial's most dramatic moment came when D.A. Mackenzie revealed her final piece of evidence, a comprehensive financial audit showing how Jackson had used company funds to maintain his elaborate deception. Mr. Hayes didn't just use Build Better Tech systems, she declared. He created an entire subsidiary, officially listed as Personal Security Solutions, that existed solely to maintain his web of lies. Throughout the proceedings, Jackson maintained a stoic demeanor, but his facade cracked when confronted with the emotional impact statements. Each woman spoke not just of betrayal, but of the calculated nature of his deception. As the trial neared its conclusion, Judge Sullivan's courtroom fell silent. The air conditioning hummed softly as she reviewed the evidence one final time. Outside, a crowd had gathered, and news helicopters circled the courthouse, their distant chopping adding tension to the moment. Mr. Hayes, she finally spoke, her voice carrying the weight of judgment. This court has seen many cases of deception and betrayal, but few have displayed the level of premeditation and technological sophistication present in your actions. She paused, looking directly at him over her reading glasses. However, your immediate confession upon confrontation, combined with your cooperation with authorities and genuine expression of remorse, must be considered in sentencing. The courtroom held its collective breath. Therefore, this court sentences you to 6 months in the Davidson County Correction Center, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. Additionally, you will step down as CEO of Build Better Tech and undergo mandatory counseling. The gavel fell with a final resonant crack that echoed through the courthouse like Tennessee thunder. As Jackson was led away by court officers, the 4 women exchanged glances. They had arrived seeking justice, but they had achieved something more. They had exposed the vulnerability of even the most sophisticated deception to the power of human connection and intelligence. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements, but the women moved through the crowd with quiet dignity. They had said everything they needed to say in court. Now, it was time to move forward. Later that evening, as the sun set over Nashville, Judge Sullivan sat in her chambers, reflecting on the case. She picked up her phone and dialed her sister. "Mary Beth," she said with a slight smile, "you won't believe the case I just finished. Get yourself a glass of wine. This story's better than any country song I've ever heard." The case of the Brownstone betrayal would be talked about in Nashville legal circles for years to come, not just for its unique use of technology and deception, but as a reminder that in the end, truth has a way of coming to light, especially when brilliant women work together to expose it. Chapter 10. Jailhouse Blues. Davidson County Correctional Facility wasn't exactly where Jackson Hayes had planned to spend his fall, but the minimum security prison had become his temporary home. Gone were the Italian suits and smart devices, Now he wore standard issue orange and had to write his thoughts in a paper journal, a requirement from his mandatory counseling program. His cell, while basic, reflected his new reality: a single bed, a metal desk, and a small window that offered a sliver of the Nashville skyline. The tech billionaire who once controlled every aspect of his environment now couldn't even choose when to turn off his lights. Hayes, his counselor, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, called out during their third session. "You've been here 2 weeks, and you still haven't answered my fundamental question: why did you do it?" Jackson sat in the sterile counseling room, staring at his hands that had built a tech empire but couldn't seem to build honest relationships. Through the barred windows, he could hear country music drifting from a distant radio, the sad twang of steel guitars somehow fitting his mood perfectly. "I thought I could optimize love," he finally admitted. "Like it was just another system to be managed, another code to be written." He laughed bitterly. "I literally created an AI to help me juggle relationships. How's that for irony?" Dr. Mitchell leaned forward, her expression neutral but attentive. "Optimize love? Tell me more about that." Over the next hour, Jackson began to unravel the complex psychology behind his actions. He talked about growing up poor in East Nashville, watching his single mother struggle with failed relationships, how he'd promised himself he'd never be vulnerable, never let anyone have that kind of power over him. "So I built systems," he explained. "Always systems. When I coded my first navigation app, it was about control, knowing exactly where everything and everyone was at all times. Then I applied that same principle to relationships." Back in his cell, Jackson spent hours writing in his journal, forced to confront his actions without the shield of technology. His entries revealed a man slowly coming to terms with the magnitude of his mistakes. Day 15. "Tried to write code in my head today. Old habits die hard. Instead had to actually feel my emotions. It's terrifying. How did I convince myself that managing 4 relationships was easier than being honest in one?" Day 30. Group therapy today. Other inmates shared their stories. One guy robbed convenience stores, another ran insurance scams. Everyone looked at me like I was crazy when I explained my relationship management system. Maybe I am. Day 45. Dr. Mitchell asked about Madeline today. For the first time, I talked about her without thinking about the other women. It hurt more than I expected. With her, I didn't need to pretend to be interested in cars. I actually was. Didn't need to fake understanding. We genuinely connected. And I ruined it all because I couldn't let go of my need for control. The prison routine forced him to live in the moment, something he'd avoided for years by hiding behind schedules and systems. Each day followed the same pattern: wake up, breakfast, work detail in the prison library, counseling, free time, lights out. No AI assistance, no complex scheduling, no technological shields between him and reality. His work in the prison library became unexpectedly therapeutic. Organizing books was a far cry from running a tech empire, but it gave him time to think. He found himself drawn to psychology books, trying to understand his own behavior. One day, while shelving books, he found an old copy of The Great Gatsby. The story of a man who built an elaborate facade to win love hit uncomfortably close to home. He spent that night's journaling session exploring the parallels. Like Gatsby, I created a version of myself I thought would be worthy of love. But I didn't stop at one version. I created 4, each perfectly tailored to what I thought each woman wanted. The tech visionary for Aaliyah, the cultured patron for Delilah, the philanthropist for Naomi, and the car enthusiast for Madeline. But which one was really me? All of them. None of them. His fellow inmates had nicknamed him the Love Hacker, a term that started as mockery but evolved into something more contemplative as they witnessed his genuine struggle for redemption. "Man," His cellmate Tommy commented one evening, "Most guys in here committed crimes for money, drugs, or revenge. You're the first one I've met who built a whole criminal enterprise just 'cause you were scared of love." The comment stuck with Jackson, leading to one of his most honest journal entries. Day 75. Tommy's right. All that technology, all those systems, they were just elaborate ways to avoid being vulnerable. I thought I was protecting myself from getting hurt, but I was really just ensuring I'd never experience real connection. The irony is that in trying to control love, I made it impossible to actually feel it. During his 4th month, Dr. Mitchell introduced a new element to his therapy, writing letters of apology. Not to send, that wasn't allowed, but to force him to confront the impact of his actions. Dear Aaliyah, I exploited your passion for technology, using it to create barriers instead of connections. You trusted me as a fellow innovator, and I turned that trust into a weapon. Dear Delilah, your music brought beauty into my life, and I repaid you with ugly deception. Every symphony we attended was real for you, and just another performance for me. Dear Naomi, your dedication to healing others showed me what true purpose looks like. While you saved lives, I calculated ways to maintain lies. Dear Madeline, with you, the lines between truth and deception blurred the most. Our conversations about cars weren't staged. They were real. Maybe that's why you scared me the most. You made me want to be genuine, and I didn't know how. The letters remained unsent, but the process of writing them forced Jackson to face the human cost of his actions. Each word written on paper, without the ability to delete or edit like on a computer, carried the weight of permanence. As his release date approached, Jackson faced a new challenge, preparing for a world where he couldn't hide behind technology. His final therapy session with Dr. Mitchell focused on this transition. "You're going back to a world that knows your story," she reminded him. "How will you handle that?" Jackson considered the question carefully. "For the first time in my life, I think I'm ready to just be myself. Whoever that is, without all the systems and schedules." His last night in prison, Jackson stood at his cell window, watching the Nashville lights twinkle in the distance. Tomorrow, he would return to a world he once thought he could control through technology and manipulation. Now he understood that real connection couldn't be optimized or automated. It had to be lived with all its messy, unpredictable humanity. In his final journal entry, he wrote, "6 months ago, I had everything: money, power, technology, and 4 women who thought they knew me. Now I have nothing except what I've learned in here. Maybe that makes me richer than I've ever been. Tomorrow I'll walk out of here with no AI systems, no scheduled appointments, no carefully crafted personas. Just me, facing whatever consequences await. For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to predict or control what happens next. And strangely, that feels like freedom." As the lights went out for the last time in his cell, Jackson Hayes, former tech billionaire, former master of deception, and now just a man trying to find redemption, closed his journal and prepared for whatever tomorrow would bring. The Nashville night wrapped around the prison like a dark blanket, and somewhere in the distance, a lone guitar played a song about second chances. Chapter 11. The Unexpected Welcome. The morning of Jackson Hayes's release dawned with the kind of crisp Tennessee clarity that makes everything seem possible. After 6 months in Davidson County Correctional Facility, he stood at the prison gates with nothing but a small bag containing his journal, the suit he'd worn to court, and 6 months of hard-earned perspective. His former driver, Thomas, waited with the Bentley, the only car from his collection he hadn't been forced to sell to pay legal fees and restitution. The familiar leather seats felt foreign now, too luxurious after months of metal chairs and prison cots. As they drove through Nashville, Jackson noticed how the city had changed, or perhaps how he had changed in seeing it. "The brownstone, sir?" Thomas asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Jackson nodded, his throat tight. The four-story building that had once housed his elaborate deception was now just a property, stripped of its technological innovations during the legal proceedings. The sophisticated AI system, the separate entrances, the scheduled elevators, all dismantled as part of his sentence. As they approached Belle Meade, Jackson's mind raced with memories. He'd expected the brownstone to be empty. Delilah had moved to New York to join the Philharmonic. Naomi had accepted a position at Johns Hopkins. Aaliyah had relocated her tech startup to Austin. And Madeline, well, he'd lost the right to know anything about Madeline's life. The Bentley pulled up to the familiar entrance. Without the AI system's welcome, the building seemed eerily quiet. Jackson took a deep breath, inserted his key into the lock, a simple mechanical key now, no biometrics or security protocols, and stepped into the marble foyer. The sound of movement from the ground-floor apartment stopped him cold. "Hello, Jackson." Her voice hadn't changed. Madeline Foster stood in the doorway of what had been her apartment, looking exactly as he remembered, yet somehow different. Her presence was like a melody he'd tried to forget, but couldn't stop hearing. "Madeline?" His voice cracked on her name. "What are you... how?" "The terms of your release included supervised rehabilitation," she said, her tone professional but not cold. "Someone needed to ensure you didn't fall back into old patterns. I volunteered." Jackson stared at her, trying to process this information. The woman he'd hurt most deeply had chosen to be part of his redemption. The irony wasn't lost on him. But why? Madeline moved into the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The sound echoed in the space that had once been dampened by sophisticated sound absorption technology. "Because," she said, studying him carefully, "out of all your relationships, ours was the only one where you occasionally forgot to pretend. When we talked about cars, about engineering, about the pure joy of a perfect machine, that was real, wasn't it?" Jackson felt tears welling in his eyes. 6 months of therapy had stripped away his ability to hide his emotions behind charm and technology. "Every moment," he whispered. "That's what scared me the most. With the others, I was playing a role. With you, I kept forgetting to act." Madeline walked to the grand staircase, once controlled by complex algorithms, now just steps leading to empty floors. She ran her hand along the banister. "They've gutted the place," she observed. "No more AI, no more scheduled elevators, no more separate lives. Just 4 empty floors and a lot of memories." "I deserve worse," Jackson admitted, setting down his bag. His prison journal peeked out, its pages filled with 6 months of self-discovery and regret. Madeline noticed the journal. "Dr. Mitchell sent me your therapy reports. She says you've done the work, really faced yourself." "I had no choice. In prison, there's nowhere to hide from yourself." Jackson moved to the window, looking out at the garden where he'd once hosted separate parties for each woman, carefully timed to never overlap. No technology to hide behind, no schedules to manipulate, just me and my thoughts, day after day. "And what did you learn from all that thinking?" Madeline's question carried the weight of 6 months of uncertainty. Jackson turned to face her. In prison, he'd imagined this moment countless times, crafted perfect speeches, rehearsed elegant apologies. But standing here, seeing her, all those practiced words felt hollow. "I learned that I was so afraid of being hurt that I hurt everyone around me. I thought I could control love like I controlled technology, input, output, predictable results. But real connection can't be programmed or scheduled." "No," Madeline agreed softly. "It can't." The silence between them filled with 6 months of unspoken words. Outside, Nashville traffic created a distant symphony of city life. Inside, Two people who had hurt and healed stood amidst the remnants of a deception neither could forget. "The others," Jackson began hesitantly. "Are they—" "They're well," Madeline supplied. "Delilah's first concert with the New York Philharmonic is next month. Naomi's research at Johns Hopkins is breaking new ground in pediatric surgery. Aaliyah's startup just secured major funding in Austin." Each success story felt like both a relief and a reminder of what his actions had cost. These brilliant women had flourished once, freed from his deception. "And you?" he asked, finally voicing the question that had haunted his nights in prison. "Why are you really here, Madeline?" She moved closer, close enough that he could smell her familiar perfume, the same scent that had lingered in his memory during endless prison nights. "Because someone once told me that not every journey needs to be the fastest route," she said, echoing their first conversation about his navigation system. "Sometimes the longest path is the one that leads to truth." Jackson felt the weight of tears on his cheeks, no longer able or willing to hide his emotions. 6 months of therapy had taught him the value of honest vulnerability. "I don't deserve a second chance," he said quietly. "No," Madeline agreed, "you don't. But redemption isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to be better, day by day, choice by choice." She reached for his prison journal, and he let her take it. "May I?" He nodded, watching as she opened to a random page and read, "Day 97. The worst part isn't losing everything. It's knowing that I had something real with Madeline and still couldn't stop myself from destroying it. If I could go back, I wouldn't change the other relationships. I'd change myself. I'd be brave enough to just be real with her." Madeline closed the journal gently. "That's why I'm here. Because somewhere between all the lies and manipulation, there were moments of truth, and maybe, just maybe, those moments are worth exploring, slowly, honestly, with no AI systems or scheduled elevators or separate lives." "Just us?" Jackson asked, hardly daring to hope. "Just us," she confirmed, "but this time with one condition. Anything. You have to be the man I glimpsed in those real moments, the one who forgot to pretend, who could talk about cars and life and dreams without checking a schedule or maintaining a facade." Jackson looked around the stripped-down brownstone, at the empty spaces where technology had once maintained his lies. Somehow, the emptiness felt right, a clean slate, a fresh start. "I don't know how to be that man all the time," he admitted, "but I want to learn." Madeline's smile held both warmth and caution. "That's a start. Welcome home, Jackson. Let's see if we can fill these empty floors with something real this time." As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors, Jackson Hayes stood in the space that had once housed his greatest deception, facing the possibility of his greatest truth. The journey ahead was uncertain, unprogrammed, and terrifying in its authenticity. But for the first time in his life, he was ready to face it without hiding behind screens and systems. Sometimes, he realized, the most sophisticated technology in the world couldn't compete with the simple complexity of two people choosing to be real with each other. Outside, Nashville continued its endless symphony of life, but inside the brownstone, a new story was beginning. One written not in code or schedules, but in the delicate language of second chances and hard-earned truth. Chapter 12. Southern Second Chances. 1 year after Jackson's release, the Nashville skyline glittered against a perfect autumn evening. The old brownstone had been transformed, not with technology this time, but with something far more valuable: truth. The grand foyer, once designed to keep lives separate, now hosted a remarkable gathering. Delilah Montgomery, fresh from a triumphant season with the New York Philharmonic, stood near the baby grand piano, her violin case beside her. Dr. Naomi Chen had flown in from Johns Hopkins, where her groundbreaking pediatric surgery techniques were saving lives. Aaliyah Washington, whose Austin-based tech company had just gone public, was explaining her latest innovation to an attentive audience. And in the center of it all stood Madeline Foster and Jackson Hayes, hosting what they had dubbed their redemption reception. The past year had been a journey of transformation. Jackson had sold the brownstone's upper floors, converting the building into a technology education center for underprivileged Nashville youth. The ground floor remained their home, a single, honest space where no lies were needed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jackson called for attention, his voice carrying across the marble floors that had once echoed with deception. "A year ago, I stood in this room a broken man, facing the consequences of my actions. Today, I stand here humble and grateful, surrounded by remarkable women who taught me the true meaning of integrity." He turned to Delilah first. "Your music showed me that real harmony can't be forced or programmed. It has to flow naturally." She smiled, lifting her violin in acknowledgement. To Naomi, "Your dedication to healing others helped heal my own soul. The precision you bring to surgery taught me that true excellence requires honesty at its core." She raised her glass in response. To Aaliyah, "Your innovative spirit reminded me that technology should connect people, not separate them. Your success proves that authenticity and innovation go hand in hand." She nodded, her tech empire's success a testament to genuine innovation. Finally, he turned to Madeline. The room fell silent, watching this moment between two people who had found truth in the ruins of deception. "And you," his voice softened, "you saw through every facade, every system, every lie. You chose to see the real me, even when I was hiding from myself. This past year of rebuilding, of learning to be genuine, it's been the hardest and most rewarding journey of my life." Madeline stepped forward, taking his hand. "The journey isn't over," she reminded him with a smile. Then, to everyone's surprise, she added, "In fact, it's about to take an interesting turn." She placed his hand on her stomach and the room erupted in joyful gasps. Jackson's eyes widened with understanding and wonder. "Really?" he whispered. "Really," she confirmed. "No scheduling required." The celebration that followed was everything the old brownstone had never been. Authentic, unified, full of genuine joy. Delilah played her violin, the music soaring through spaces once dampened by soundproofing. Naomi shared stories of medical miracles while Aaliyah demonstrated her latest tech innovations, designed to bring people together, not keep them apart. As the evening wound down, Jackson found himself on the terrace, looking out over the city he'd once tried to control. Madeline joined him, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. "I was just thinking about systems," he replied. "I spent years building them to manage love, to control connections. But standing here now, I realize the most beautiful system is the simplest one, two people choosing each other every day in complete truth." Inside, through the terrace doors, they could see their gathered guests, not separated by flaws or schedules, but united in celebration. The women he had once deceived had become something unexpected, advocates for his redemption, proof that healing was possible. "The baby," Jackson said softly, his hand resting on Madeline's stomach, "will never know the man I was, only the man I've become." "That's the point of redemption," she replied. "The past shapes us, but it doesn't define us." The Nashville night wrapped around them like a warm embrace. In the distance, music drifted from Broadway's honky-tonks, a reminder that every good country song has elements of heartbreak and healing. Delilah's violin began to play again inside, a piece she'd composed specially for the occasion. She called it The Redemption Symphony, a musical journey from discord to harmony. Dance with me, Madeline suggested. Here, now? Why not? No schedules, no plans, no artificial intelligence telling us when and where to move. Just us, this moment, this truth. As they swayed to the music under the Tennessee stars, Jackson realized that all his sophisticated systems had never created anything as perfect as this simple dance. The woman in his arms was carrying their child, a future built on honesty instead of deception. The other guests gradually joined them on the terrace. Naomi was discussing a medical fellowship program she'd created for Nashville students. Aaliyah was explaining how her new tech company prioritized human connection over artificial efficiency. Delilah continued playing, her music weaving their stories together. "I have an announcement," Jackson said, as the violin's notes faded. "The Technology Education Center will be expanding. We're creating scholarships for young women in STEM fields, named after each of you." The women who had once been victims of his deception would now be inspirations for future generations. Their names would be associated not with scandal, but with opportunity and growth. "To new beginnings," Madeline proposed, raising her glass of sparkling cider. "To truth," added Naomi. "To harmony," Delilah contributed. "To genuine connections," Aaliyah concluded. "To love," Jackson said simply, "in its most authentic form." As the night drew to a close, the old brownstone stood transformed. The spaces that had once housed elaborate deceptions now echoed with genuine laughter and truth. The AI systems were gone, replaced by something far more powerful, human connection in its purest form. Jackson and Madeline remained on the terrace after their guests departed, watching the Nashville lights twinkle like stars brought down to earth. Their future stretched before them, unscheduled and real. "You know," Madeline mused, "some might say this ending is too perfect." Jackson smiled, pulling her close. "Not perfect, real, and that's better than any perfection I could have programmed." Above them, a shooting star streaked across the Tennessee sky, nature's own light show, unplanned and beautiful. In the end, Jackson Hayes had discovered that the most sophisticated system in the world was the simple truth of love, freely given and honestly earned. The brownstone stood as a testament to transformation, its walls now echoing with a new story, one of redemption, second chances, and the profound power of choosing truth over perfection. In the heart of Nashville, where country songs tell stories of love lost and found, this tale would be remembered not for its deception, but for its journey toward authentic love. And that was the greatest innovation of all. Subscribe if liked.